I'd like to thank everyone for clicking into our show today. We have a special guest on Sit Down with Ed Brown, Mrs. Arla Williams. How are you today, Arla?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking. I generally like to start the show off by asking what got you interested in the Bigfoot subject to begin with.
Okay. Well, basically, I've had pretty much a lifelong knowing, so it wasn't like I saw the Patterson-Gimlin or Boggy Creek or anything else. I actually had a face-on-face, full-body encounter with a young male, and I was at my grandmother's playing in the dirt with some sticks and things, and he kind of walked out of the woods and stood there and looked at me, and I looked at him for a little while, and then eventually he turned around and walked back off into the woods, and at that point I jumped up and went in and told my grandmother what I had seen and described it to her. And at that point, I had no reference for it, so, I asked her, what was that, Granny? And basically all she said to me was, what do you think it was? And she let me think about that myself, and then a little later she started explaining to me about them.
That's amazing. I mean, that would be life-changing, and apparently it was for you as well. And I have to admit, though, that would scare me to death. Was it scary for you?
No, but, I was probably a problem child from the time I was born. I was running off to the woods. Sure. And, so I didn't have any fear of the woods or anything in the woods. And, I knew it was a boy, because at 6 I knew the difference between boys and girls.
Sure.
And, he looked like I did, except he had a whole lot of hair.
That was my next question. I was going to ask you to give me, if you can, and I know it was a while back, but can you give me a detailed description of what he looked like?
Well, he wasn't a whole lot bigger than I was, I don't think. I was sitting on the ground, and I didn't get up or anything. I just sit there on the ground, and basically I was busy playing and heard footsteps, coming towards me, and I just thought it was my grandmother,
Sure.
So I wasn't paying any attention. But then when I looked up, I realized it wasn't my grandmother.
Right.
He had hair. He was a brownish color, and he didn't, he wasn't extremely hairy. It wasn't shaggy or anything. Mm-hmm. He just had hair all over his body. His face was very human, like any, other kid that I might have seen. There wasn't like a whole lot of hair on his face either.
Right.
So it, like I said, I never had any fear of being in the woods or anything that was in the woods. And, he just walked up, we kind of looked at each other, and, I like to try to think back at that point. And,
Sure.
Probably what was going through my mind was, man, that's a hairy kid. And I'm sure, he was probably thinking, man, that kid doesn't have any hair at all. So it was just, something that happened.
Sure. Now, you've done, obviously this was a life-changing event for you. I would imagine anyway. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, because at that point, my grandmother, started teaching me about them and who they were. Mm-hmm. And, from that point on, I was assured that they were there. They were in the woods. You didn't see them all the time, but you knew they were there, and basically, she told me they live their lives and we live our lives, and if we have respect between us, there'll be no problems. Sure. And so, it was just matter of fact as to this is how it is. And, when I would have a question or something, I could go to her and ask her, but I was taught to think for myself.
Sure.
And she didn't always just immediately give me a total explanation of anything. She let me think about it, and then we would talk about it. And even if I thought something different than she did, she didn't say to me, "Oh, that's not right." You know, we would talk about it, and it, you know, I wasn't forced to think anything.
Sure. Now, your grandmother, I mean, obviously, if she knew so much about it, did she ever share with you any of her experiences that maybe you could share with us?
No, she basically just, you know, talked about them always being there. You know, we knew they were. She taught me a lot of things. She's actually the one that taught me about the ones who will come and, you know, more so work with us humans, or, you know, be a part of what we do, or whatever. She taught me about that long before, you know, I ever knew much of anything. I was just little when she taught me about those, that there were different ones who would come and, you know, spend more time, I guess, with us, trying to help us see things. If you look at Native stories, a lot of Native people will tell you that they have a message for us, and they will tell you that when they show themselves more, it's because we're not living like we're supposed to be living. We're doing some things that maybe we shouldn't be doing, or maybe we should be rethinking, you know, how we're doing things. And, you know, I've heard many tribal elders talk about that you know, that was the message. And so you had a lot of people that were like, "Oh my gosh, I hope I don't see them," you know, because that's going to be telling me I need to, you know, change something. But, you know, she told me that she called them another us. And what she meant by that, she said they are like us in ways, and they are not like us in ways.
Sure.
And, you know, throughout the years we talked, you know, whenever, it wasn't like it was a constant thing, but if I had a question, and talk to her about it.
Sure.
And, you know, but I've got this crazy photo of her, and I think it's in the late 40s, if I'm not mistaken. And she is demonstrating a Bigfoot walk. And it's it's just hilarious. It is just so my grandmother. And she's got this big smile on her face, and got her legs stretched out real far, and she's got her arms like she's trying to motivate her. And it's just hilarious. So, you know,
if you'd like to share that picture, send that to us, and we'll add that in this exact moment so people can see that while you're talking about it. That's great. I mean, that's awesome.
I will. I will.
Now, when you were a little girl, 6, 7 years old, I understand when you were playing, did you get the sense at the time that it was just another juvenile that was curious and maybe wanted to come and play with you? Is that kind of the sense you had?
Well, you know, it's really interesting, because when I was little, I gathered up sticks and other kinds of things and would make elaborate homes or all kinds of structures and crazy things. And when Alex Evans did the portrait of my encounter for my book cover, looking at it, it dawned on me something. And then it was interesting because I had a few other people ask me this question. And, you know, because it is said that they do make structures and use sticks and things to write with and stuff, did he come up to see what I was doing with those sticks? Because it's something they do.
Right. That's a great question. I mean, I guess it's one of those you will never know, but it's great to imagine what such an animal or human would be thinking. You know, it's
Well, I'm sure he was assessing me, looking me over and saying, man, this little hairless kid here is playing with sticks and I make that kind of stuff too. No, that's interesting.
Sure.
And who knows? He could have watched me from the woods from the time I was little. Those
right.
are things sometimes that you may never have the answers for. All I can do on some things is speculate as to the whys. But it is kind of fun to think about the whys.
Sure. Now, you mentioned a minute ago, the sticks and the structures. We see and we hear a lot about tree structures and the glyphs and what are your views on these?
Well, I've seen too many of them. I used to just take photos of them, but I started videoing them because it gives you more, you can get a three-dimensional with a video camera. You can,
sure.
come all the way around it and look at it. And yes, I very well believe that they do that. There are some people that don't, but, that's okay too.
Sure.
We're all learning in this. I just know from my interaction, and I'm very analytical too about these things. I don't just walk out into the woods and go, oh, wow, that looks like a structure. I bet Bigfoot made that.
Right.
I don't do that. I have criteria that I go over and ask all these questions of, how did this get here? Was there anybody in this area? How quickly was this made?
Sure.
And, you begin to see things more than once. And then you have to stop and say, okay, something's going on here. And then when you connect with other people and they're getting the same things happening, you have to stop and think, something's going on here. Why is this happening? Right. And why are these people having this happen when I'm having this happen? And, you can say, well, until somebody sees them do it, we can't say they do it, but there have been people.
Sure. And a lot, and like you, I don't think that every oddity in the woods is made by a Bigfoot. However,
no.
I do think that there are some things that I see that are not caused by nature, that are not caused by man. You can't, it's hard to explain a 5-foot diameter tree that is twisted and broke 10 feet in the air. Animals just don't do that. So it's
right.
And those are very interesting things. And I mean, why do you think they do things like that? Well, what do you think the reason would be? And I know it's speculation, but what do you think the reason would be?
Well, part of what they do, well, I'll say 95% of what they do is for them and actually has nothing to do with us.
Sure.
Now you can have interaction with them, because that's being done all over. I know a lot of people who are having interaction with the glyph writing and that type of thing. So they're going to have their reasons for it. A lot of people say, oh my gosh, an X is keep out. Well, you can't say that that's always what that X is going to mean.
Sure.
And one of the things that they started using with me, and it happened enough times that I had to stop and say, okay, guys, I recognize what this is. This is one of the old sign language things that means friendship or family or something like that. And you're putting it in my face. I mean, it's in front of my tent, appears in front of my tent, and, it's one of them, for instance, one of the things that they did was they put this X in front of my tent. And I hadn't got to go out and spend a night in the tent. I didn't get to hike back in there and stay. And so when I went back the next day, that X, a piece of blue tarp, had been pulled out like a long string, and that X had been decorated.
Oh, wow.
Now, there were no people back in this particular area. I know that for sure.
Sure.
And I don't think coons or deer or anything like that pull long strips of tarp out and decorate an X.
Right.
If they do, I want to see them. But, so you just have to have this elimination thing going on. What could have done this? And, to say, well, a Bigfoot did it, I'm going to need to be pretty sure for me to say that, and it's the same with the photos that I've taken, Indigo's photo, for instance. If I don't see them before I take a photo, you're not going to hear me say, there's Bigfoot in that picture.
Right.
I just, that's my rule of thumb, and I'm not saying that anybody else is wrong to take photos and kind of feel like they're in their area and then get back and download them and see something. I'm not going to say those are not real either. I'm just going to say for me to tell you that's what's in there. I saw it beforehand. So.
Absolutely. Now you mentioned Indigo, and you sent me some pictures. Now, there's one picture that I've got a couple pictures here that I want to discuss, but one in particular that I find I think it's fascinating. A lot of green foliage, and there's a spot in the middle of the photo, and then you also gave me a really close-up of that same shot. And I'll tell you, I'm looking at this and I'm going, wow. There's definite eyebrows. You can see the nose, you see the cone-shaped head.
Yeah.
Now that's Indigo, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
It's funny, too, because Indigo has been all over the web and all over Facebook, and a lot of people have claimed taking his photo. And, it's kind of funny because I'll have people contact me. I saw Indigo's photo over at some group, and this guy said he took this photo. Do you want me to tell them that's not his photo? And I'm like, no, it doesn't make any difference to me.
Right.
Most of the people who know me know Indigo, which is kind of funny.
Sure.
But they immediately recognize his photo. And, I knew he was there that day. I'd seen him. So it's not like, oh, wow, maybe I'm going to catch him. I told him. And I always do this when I'm in the woods taking photos. I always just say, hey, guys, I'm taking pictures. If you want to be in my picture, fine. And if you don't, fine. And I've had photos where I knew they were there. They did not show up in the photos. So, you can call me crazy or delusional or droopy or whatever. It doesn't really matter. The thing is, I have respect for them.
Sure.
And I don't want to do anything that I shouldn't be doing. And none of those photos that I have are definitive by any stretch of the imagination. And I don't really care if they are definitive, at this point. I'm not trying to prove that they exist by a photo. My main concern is that people give them the respect that they should have to, be allowed to live the life that they've chosen to live, and for man not to be hunting them and harassing them.
You mentioned the people take your photos and say they took them and things of that nature, and it's like, unfortunately, we'll call it the Bigfoot community, and there's not a whole lot. There are some not so let's say legit people in the community, and people are bound to do that, unfortunately. But I will tell you, I look at this close-up picture, and I will put it in my top, we'll say, 4 pictures I've ever seen as far as what I think is real, and I think it's a great photo, and I think I'm still looking at it going, whoa, wow.
Well, he is definitely real, and actually that photo was taken several years ago when he was quite a bit younger. So he's changed a little, and he's grown some, but he's, I didn't have any reason to put that out there to try to fool anybody.
Sure.
When I came into the Bigfoot research world, I didn't even know it existed. I didn't even know it existed for the majority of my life. But I did know that the Bigfoot existed.
Sure.
So, I've known about the Bigfoot a heck of a lot longer than I ever knew about the Bigfoot research world.
Now, another picture that I wanted to touch on was not quite as clear as the first one we talked about, but this one was taken, looks like probably in winter, maybe late autumn, and you see a lot of trees going in different directions, and then there's a form right in the middle. And
that would be Blue. Is
Blue?
it you're talking about Blue's photo? That would be Indigo's younger brother. That photo, I did not take myself. I did have my camera with me, but my batteries went dead. Now, there were 5 of us there when that photo was taken. Mm-hmm. And it was taken with an iPhone, actually, I think. And he knew we were doing it. Mm-hmm. When he was seen, where he is, there's a ravine right back behind him. And so he could come up that ravine and kind of sit down there. And if he needed to scoot, he could just take a step back and be down and gone. Sure. But one of the girls saw him and said, "We got a peeker." And so I turned around to look, and there he was. So the others were going, "Where is he? Where is he?" Well, we're pointing at him. "He's right there. See him? He's right there." And, and they're going, "Oh, my God, there he is." We're acting like, crazy. And he was sitting there looking at us. And so one of the girls just took his photo.
That's a great story. That would be, for me personally, that'd be like a dream come true to have an opportunity to, see a peeker and be able to take a picture, to see it with my own eyes, and that's something that I've not had happen yet, but I hope to. But
it's I do too. I was in Georgia last October. I have these gatherings where I travel around, and they're laid back. I call them laid back gatherings because we're just out primitive camping, and we're not really doing anything. We're sharing stories, and there were people there who had never had a sighting, and one of the women had a daytime sighting. We were sitting in camp talking, and she's standing up looking off into the woods, and all of a sudden she says, "Oh my God, there's one." And so of course everybody jumps up and tries to see, but it is easier to do than what most think it is. And, it's very simple. It has a lot to do with respect and how you're acting when you're out there and what your purpose is. When you're out there in the woods, what's your purpose? What are you out there doing? And they love to see us have fun. It's just like the biggest calling card for people to be out enjoying themselves. So like I said, it's a lot easier than a lot of people think it is.
Well, it's funny you say that because, I never put the two together. But if you think about it, most of what I would consider authentic photographs or videos that I've seen, that's the exact case. They weren't trying to find Bigfoot. They were doing their thing and captured it, and an image anyway, or a video. So that's an interesting point.
Yeah, it's like I said, they love to watch us. They love, people say, "Oh, if you go out and play music and stuff, they're going to come." Well, most people who can play music or sing or whatever enjoy doing it.
Sure.
And so there again, you're enjoying something, and they're, going to come watch you enjoy yourself. That's why, a lot of the tribal people here talk about, when you have a powwow or something, and the drums and people having a good time together and the dancing and everything, they'll come and stay back in the tree line and watch, what's going on.
That's interesting. And it's funny you mentioned the music part because one of my previous guests on the show, Derek Randall, made that point. He said, "Why do you think there are so many musicians who are into the Bigfoot subject?" And And I guess that has a lot to do with it. You know, being out, doing what you love to do, you have an experience or you have an encounter, and damn, you know, you're hooked. Now, you've been out quite a bit, and I have to ask you, you've discovered, you know, what you interpret as birthing stations. What do they look like, and how do you make that distinction that these are birthing stations?
Well, you know, when you go into a place, you look at what is all around you. You know,
sure.
Go look at everything that's around you. What are some of the things that you see? Number one, you're going to be in a place where humans are not readily going to come. Number two, you're going to be in a place where they have advantage of watching all around them to see if anything's going to happen. And then, you know, you look at the structure and how is that structure made? What all is around that structure? And then you look for other structures. And in the case of the one place I was, there was this gigantic hollowed out tree basically laying down. So, you know, it was like a log, but it was huge.
Sure.
And there was a structure, a teepee structure built over that, just a small one. You know, and you look at that and you can say, man, that's perfect to lay a baby in. I mean, because, you know, you've got this open area here up on top of this mountain, and, you know, what are you going to do? I've talked to other people, too. You know, I talk to an awful lot of people, and we compare notes about, you know, what we think and how we see things. And, you know, and then I go back to things I was taught, you know, and I try to put all of that together and try to understand it.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, do you, as far as the birthing stations are concerned, I mean, do you believe that this is a place that all Bigfoot in that area, you know, would use, you know, that are about to give birth, or do you think it's just something that was used once and never used again?
You know, it could be either, I guess. You know, if you've got a place that's safe for someone to go and have a baby, why wouldn't more than one utilize it if they were sharing space?
Right.
You know?
And I agree. Now, would that mean that they are there year round, or do you think they move around? Do you think they're mobile, or do you think they have a home base per se?
Well, I think that they have, you know, a home base, a territory, if you want to call it. And from what I've seen, they don't mark territory boundaries and say, this is my territory and you stay in yours. They coexist. And, you know, from what I've seen, and that's, you know, that's the only thing that I can give you that I'm assured, you know, that I can say this, is that they do have a home area, but they can travel to other places. It's like here in the Comanche Mountains, around the edges of the Comanche Mountains. Sometimes if you have a drought or, you know, something like that, it seems like they will leave areas and go further into the mountains somewhere, and they won't be around that one area. But if you've got normal weather patterns, they're in and out of the same areas. And, you know, it's like here, they're not here 24 hours a day.
Right.
You know, I might not see them for a while. They may be gone somewhere, you know, but I don't go out into the woods looking for them either.
Sure.
You know, I walk the woods all the time because it's what I've done all my life. And, you know, if they're around, that's good. And if they're not, you know, it's good too. So, but just, you know, from what I've been able to see, and you know, I go on signs and things like that they're in the area, footprints and, you know, whatever.
Great. Now, I'm going to try to ask this question without butchering this word, because I'm actually going to use one of your words here that I found. I have no doubt that Shamuna, or Bigfoot that they have some social hierarchy, you know. during your studies, and what have you learned about their social group? Can you give us some detail on that?
Well, they're they're extremely family oriented. I've never seen a higher up attitude from from what I've seen. There are those who do, I believe, readily work around humans and come closer to humans than others, and I think that's by choice. I don't think that that's because they're told they can't. I think it's more by choice. The word Shamuna means place of the two moons, and that was something that that I was told that they were called is the Shamuna people. And I wouldn't say that all of them are called the Shamuna people. That would be like me saying every Indian in the United States is Cherokee, or every person in Scotland is Scottish, or anything like that. I can't say that. All I can talk about is from what I've seen and what I've interacted with. Now, like I said, I've talked to a lot of people in Canada and across the United States, and even talked with people from Australia. Mm-hmm. But I've heard different names that they've been called, so there's no way I would tell anyone this is what they're all called, and this is, it's just not something I would do.
Right. Well, see, and that's funny because that kind of backfired on me a little bit, because I wanted to use the word to show you that I did my homework. And apparently I didn't do very well, because my understanding was that was your definition, and that's what you called the Bigfoot in general. That's the way I understood it. So, so I'm glad you cleared that up for me. I appreciate that. But the higher...
Yeah. Like I said, when I look at them from what my grandmother taught me, and then from what I've experienced, they're an ancient tribal people, and they have, a tribal system, like things that I've seen. You've got those who, would maybe teach culture or, whatever. At this point, you could say, well, they're the ones who have the medicine, who take care of everybody, like the doctor, or whatever. Sure. So that's kind of how I've come to understand it, is they have that same kind of structure that ancient tribal people would have, and not just Native Americans either, but indigenous people from all over the world.
Now, speaking of Native Americans, I wanted to kind of switch gears here a little bit and go into that part of you, of your history, because I think that's important to understand, to grasp everything else that you've talked about so far, And now you are, I tried to do my homework. You're part Cherokee, I understand?
Yes, the grandmother that taught me the most, taught me from birth that I carried Cherokee blood. Mm-hmm. And she taught me to be proud of that. But she also told me never to disregard any part of myself, because I'm not all Cherokee. I have Choctaw in me. I've got Scottish. I've got French. I've got Polish. And so all of those bloods are to be honored, because what she told me was, if you dishonor any part of yourself, you've dishonored all of yourself.
Agreed.
So can I say I had a truly Cherokee teaching from her? No, I wouldn't say that at all. But I've talked with enough elders, Cherokee and otherwise, to know that what she did teach me was very much like a lot of tribal people do teach.
Right. And I think that's important. I mean, you make a great point when you talk about it. When you disrespect one part of yourself, you disrespected the whole part, And I think it's a great point, and I think it's something we can all learn from. While I was reading your background a little bit, I found these three things that I have to ask you about, because they just really fascinated me. The first one: what does it mean to be a rock skull carrier for the Nation of the Stone People?
There are a lot of rock skull carriers, and that, you know, a lot of people are going to have a problem with this, but that's fine too. There are many indigenous teachings about the skulls. One of our grandmothers, the International Council of 13 Indigenous Grandmothers, is a skull carrier. And these are ancient teachings that we talk about. I was gifted. Well, actually, I have two that I was gifted, and I honor them for what they are. Our grandmothers, you know, teach us that there are many things out there that some are not going to understand. Sure. And just because someone doesn't understand something doesn't negate it. And that's one thing that we have to understand when we start working with things that are outside of most people's understanding, is to realize that, you know, just because they don't understand this doesn't negate it, nor does it make those people who don't understand it wrong either. Mm-hmm. You know, so you have to address this in a respectful way.
Sure, and I agree. And if anyone has a problem with that, you know, you mentioned, you know, there are people who have problems. They shouldn't have. You know, it blows my mind to think about how people jump to conclusions. And if there's one thing I've learned in the Bigfoot community is, if you don't agree 100% with someone else, then you're completely wrong. You know, and that's and I wish that we could all sit down and say, look, you know, everybody's theories and everybody's ideas are just that. They're just theories and ideas.
Exactly.
We should share those and come up with a logical conclusion as to what these things are. You know, where do they come from? What do they, you know? And I wish at some point the community could kind of come to some resting point and get to that.
Well, you know, it's one thing you probably have heard about me is it doesn't bother me for people to not believe anything I say. You know, when I do a conference or I go to speak, I always do my little disclaimer. You know, what I'm going to share with you is totally my experiences.
Right.
And you do not have to believe anything. You can take from it what you want, or you don't have to take anything that I say. But if you would, file it away somewhere. Just put it back somewhere else, and maybe at some point you will need a reference for that, and then you will have it. And, you know, like I said, it doesn't hurt my feelings. I don't take it personal, you know, when people come at me and tell me I'm delusional and, you know, whatever. It doesn't affect me one way or the other. I'm always going to speak respectfully to them and do my best to not be disrespectful to anybody.
Sure. Well, let me say publicly, you know, I've had the opportunity to chat with you quite a bit online before the interview, and during the interview, I have nothing but respect for you, and I hope you know that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate
you're very welcome.
that.
I think you've got some great stories to tell. I think you have some great ideas, and I'm glad I get an opportunity to listen to them firsthand. I'm the lucky one here.
Well, thank you.
You actually mentioned something else in your answer there that was actually number 2 on my list. Was, what does it mean to be an Indigenous grandmother? What is that? It just sounds interesting.
An Indigenous grandmother. It's interesting because Jyoti, she's my sister for all intents and purposes, and is the one that had the vision for the International Council of 13 Indigenous Grandmothers. Mm-hmm. She calls us sister grandmothers because we're just in training. And then, you know, we have the 13 grandmothers, and Indigenous is the tribal people from all around the world. And in those 13 grandmothers, there are grandmothers from around the world. It's not just Native American grandmothers. And they have all made a difference in the people, their people, and the people who live where they are. We have grandmother Searing, who had to flee Tibet when China overtook Tibet. And she's just done some monumental things, down to we've got a Yupik grandmother from Alaska, who is the first person to ever have an Indigenous clinic teaching and practicing the medicine of her people. And, we've got grandmothers who are in Amazon, grandmothers who are in Africa, Nepal, all over here in the United States, in Mexico. So these are women who have made a difference, and they are what we call prayer warriors. And they're putting out the word that, we've got to come back to a way of working with the earth and not working against the earth.
Sure. That's exactly what we should all be doing. Now,
yeah.
What is the group, this is my third one, by the way, what is the group A Bridge to Oneness? And what's the goal of the group? What do you do?
Well, that was a thing that the Center for Sacred Studies had put out. And what they were trying to do, and what some of the teachings and the different people who were associated with that group, was they're trying to bring everybody together and let everybody understand and see in a good way. Kind of like if we could get the Bigfoot world of people together to sit down and talk with each other instead of talking at each other,
yes,
then something good could happen. And that's what, the grandmothers want people to see, is that we're all actually relatives. We are all kin to each other, and everything that's in this universe and on this earth is a relative. We're all a part of each other. We breathe the same air. And, that's what that was about. That was about trying to bring about a oneness with all of us and to see that oneness that we are in a completion.
Great. And the reason I bring these things up is obviously they were very interesting. I love hearing the stories, and it's a great idea and great goal set, by your group. But the reason I wanted to bring these up was so that people can understand why you have the theories you have, because it's based on, not just you now, but the history of man, the history of your, of Native American people, the history, and it's so important to add all this together when you come to a conclusion. And I think your theories are very well right on track.
Well, for me, this whole Bigfoot thing fits perfectly in with what the grandmothers are trying to bring to this world, is this unity, this oneness, and quit, saying, well, you're crazy because you think this, and I don't believe that because I believe science has to prove everything for it to be true, instead of saying, okay, let's just look at this and let's just talk about it. No, I don't have to believe that. And there's a lot of stuff that I hear about the Bigfoot that I don't believe either. But
sure.
I don't tell people, hey, you can't believe that, because that's not my place to do that.
Right. Yeah, you're right. It's not my place to tell people what they can or cannot believe, and I don't try to. I just want to. I like to get in as many different views and angles as I can, so I can base my own personal opinion objectively. But there was actually one question in regards to the Bigfoot that I wanted to ask you, and I missed this question. So if you don't mind, I'm going to back up for just a second. Do you participate in any kind of gifting? And if so, to what success?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, great. I had a feeling you did.
That's been going on for a long time. I love leaves, and, I told you earlier that I've picked up all kinds of things from the time I was little bitty, and I've always loved leaves. And anywhere I would go, I would just gather up handfuls of leaves and play with them, and I've done that through to now. And it's very interesting is I am left leaves and left them in a way that you know for certain it was a gift or it was something traded. And there was one, I found a piece of flint, a pretty good-sized piece of flint, and I picked it up, and I thought, now that's really cool. You know, I'm going to take it back and see if my striker at home, if I can get sparks off of it. Mm-hmm. And I could. And then I thought, you know, I think I'm going to go put that on the gifting trading stone and see if they would want it, because it's beautiful. Not that they would need it for fire, but sure, it just had so many beautiful facets to it and everything else, and I just wanted to share it with them. So I took it and put it on the stone. I went back the next day, and underneath that big piece of flint was a stem with several leaves still attached to it.
Oh, so they knew what it was for.
Yeah. To the best of my knowledge, a stem full of leaves cannot fall underneath a piece of flint.
Yeah, it would be kind of tough, yeah.
You know, so, but it, you know, and I, of course, I have photos of that too.
Sure.
But yeah, we do. We have this funny rule because, you know, I have a garden, and one particular year I had whole watermelons missing. And mm-hmm. these were like Cobb Gem and Black Diamond, and they were like anywhere from 50, most of these were in the range of 75-pound watermelons.
Wow.
And I would watch them religiously because sure, it was like, oh, man, it's going to be ready and I'm going to get it. And I would go to pick it, and it would just be gone. Now, if a coon or a coyote or a deer or something else, they just mess with them. They tear them up, basically, and sure, there'll be pieces, you know, laying around. These were just gone.
Wow.
And, you know, it finally came to me what was going on. So I enacted a 50-50 rule. They can have 50% of anything I grow.
Okay.
But they have to leave 50% for me because I have family to feed, too.
How do you communicate that? How do you communicate the rule with them? I mean, how do you tell them, okay, you can have half?
I just do it. I just go out and talk. Do I see them all the time when I do that? No, I don't. But I'm a verbal person, and I just go out into the woods and I just say, hey, you know, this is how this is.
This is a new rule. You're going to live with it.
Yep, and down to the nth degree, they do this. And I have so many, you know, things that I could talk about of where they have proved that, but one of the most cool ones was I use cornmeal in ceremony sometimes, and I wanted to take them some fresh ground cornmeal, and I put it in a Ziploc bag, and I filled it. Well, I took it down to an area, and I tied it to a tree with a vine. Mm-hmm. When I went back down in that area, the vine had been tied back different than I had tied it. 50%, half of the cornmeal had been taken out of that Ziploc bag. Half of it had been left.
I mean, that to me, that would just surprise me. And that's a great story.
You know, that's a Ziploc bag. That's not just sitting out somewhere.
Sure.
Plus, it was tied to the tree, and it was untied, taken, and, you know, 50% taken out and 50% left. And they've done it, you know, like I said, numerous times with things. So do they know? Well, evidently they do, because that's how things started being after the watermelon started disappearing.
And has it stayed that way? I mean, has there been times when... Good.
Yeah, it does, down to, you know, one evening I was out in the garden and I'd picked a couple of cantaloupes and something caught my attention, and I laid the 2 cantaloupes down in the grass on the side, and then I went off and was doing something, and I got in the house later and I forgot I got them, and I thought, I'll just leave them. I'll go get them in the morning. when I went the next morning, one was gone, one was left.
That's awesome. I mean, that really is. That's fascinating. That's great.
So, was it a coon that came and got one, or a coyote? Well, no, coyotes can't even get in there. I mean, or deer either, because it's all fenced.
Sure.
But, no, if it had been a coon, there would have been pieces here and there and, whatever, so.
Right. That's, again, that's fascinating. I think that's insanely fascinating. It just blows my mind to think that, you basically set rules and parameters, and they follow that. That's great.
Yep. Well, what does that say? That says these are a people of some kind.
Sure.
And they have to understand what I'm saying.
Right.
To do that.
Absolutely. Now, do you have any speaking engagements, Bigfoot conferences coming up at any time?
Actually, I will be in down around Honubby in April. I think the 18th and 19th. I think it's called the Looking Back Late Conference in southeastern Oklahoma. In I think May, I will be in Kentucky, and it'll just be one of my laid back gatherings. And then I will be in Georgia the next week, and that will be for just a laid-back gathering. And then I will be in California in June.
Well, sounds like you got a pretty hefty schedule. Now you'll have to let me know, of course, when you go to Kentucky, because I live in Ohio myself, so I'm not too far
I'd
from
love
there.
to have you.
And,
it would be awesome.
I'd be honored.
I tell people, we're coming together just to share stories. We're not coming together to go out in the woods and hunt Bigfoot. We're going to come together. We're going to all enjoy. We're going to cook. We're going to eat. We're going to sing and just have a really good time. And, if we have some interaction, good. And if we don't, well, we had a good time. So, that's basically, I'm not going into the woods and calling the Bigfoot up. It's just not something that I would do to begin with. So it's just to go have fun and connect.
That's awesome. I actually talked to Cliff Bragman from the show Finding Bigfoot, and he basically said the exact same thing. He said he just loves to do it, and that when he goes out, he doesn't care if he finds one or if he gets any proof. He enjoys the time in the woods. He enjoys the experience, and I think that's, and I think that's so important. Enjoy yourself first. You don't have to go out with the sole intention of hunting down and trying to find proof of a Bigfoot. Go have fun. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Yep.
Now you have
your chances are greatly increased if you go with that attitude.
Yes.
Of just going to have fun.
I think it would, especially if these are people that understand and can communicate, then it makes it even more likely that that's the case.
Mhm.
So that's a good point. Now you have a new book coming out soon too, don't you? Well, what can you tell us about that?
Yes, I do. Well, it's in the publishing phase at this point.
Sure.
And so I should be getting it here before too long, here sometime first part of March. And we decided to do pre-sales on them. And we had started out with a pre-sale being the first 25 I would number and sign specifically for that. Well, we had to up it to the first 50 because the first 25 went pretty fast. And so we've upped it to the first 50. We'll be numbered. And I'm like, good grief, what difference does it make if I number this book or not? It's not like it's, any holy grail of Bigfoot or anything. It's, just my life and, some other things, in there too. So, but yeah, I'm excited about it. I never wanted to write a book. I fought for years and years and years writing a book. And when it happened, it was like this dam was taken down, and so much has started to come that I've got other books in the works now. So it's like this thing that I fought for such a long time, and I even talk about having a war with writing this book, and now it's like there's more. I've got more that I want to share.
Good. Now, you told me that you are also working on a series of children's books also, correct?
Yes, I am.
Now what's the format? I know you told me, I'm going to let you tell everybody, but what's the format? What's the storyline?
Well, the storyline is, and basically the series will be called The Two Hairy Boys, a.k.a. Indigo and Blue.
There you go.
And basically what it's going to be are teaching books. And it's books about learning to be, there'll be one series on respect. And it will be different ways of respect, respecting your elders, respecting the water, respecting the air, all different forms of things where we need to be respectful. But it will be through Indigo and Blue's, the hairy boys' life with their grandfather as the primary teacher. And I'm really excited about doing them. I have 15 grandchildren, so, I'm very much the grandmother. And it's very important that we teach these things. And what better, than to teach them with two hairy boys and how they're living their lives.
Well, you're just like my mother. Actually, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm probably gonna get in trouble for this, but I believe I have 15 nieces and nephews, which would mean I have 2 children myself. So my mother would have 17 grandchildren. So that's yeah. We won't let
I actually have 5 great-grandchildren, too.
Oh, wow.
So, I'm not a spring chicken by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, you are definitely an inspiration to a lot of people. I'll tell you. I mean, I've watched some of the videos you've done, and I heard one you were talking about trying to get up a hill that was really steep, but by God, you did it.
Oh, yes.
And I thought that was awesome. I thought that was great.
I'm not much of a quitter, and I've got a lot of life left, and I wanna live it. This summer, there are 3 or 4 of us women who are going to backpack 8 miles into the mountains in California to where a friend of mine had an experience many years ago, and we're going to hike back in there and just see if there's anything going on there, and then hike back out and be at another big camp out after we do that. So
now, are you going to document that experience? Are you going to document that?
Yes, we are, because it's just women. We're not going to let any guys go with us. It's just going to be us women. And depending on Watto, my dog, who most people, if you know me, you know Watto, if she's up for it, she's going to get to go too. So, that dispels that myth that Bigfoot don't like all dogs, because that's certainly not true. They don't like aggressive dogs.
Right.
People don't like aggressive dogs. If you got a dog coming after you, what are you going to do? You're going to stop the dog.
Sure. Now, one other piece of work you have that I wanted to touch on real quick before I let you go, because I've taken up a lot of your time, and you've been awesome. I've enjoyed this so much. But you have a little CD, I guess, called Arla's Wood Whispers?
Yes, that's my... when I go to the woods to say my prayers, a lot of my prayers are songs, and I sing my prayers. And that came about, actually the CD came about because I have a friend who's a part of a theater group, and they needed some music for production they were doing, Escanaba After Midnight, and in that there was supposed to be this man who has this shamanic experience with a female. And this friend of mine who was doing this asked me, would I lay down some tracks so that he could see if that would work for the music so they wouldn't have to use some kind of canned music or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so I laid down several different things, and he put them all together and used them then for that production. From that, the CD grew. And there are songs that I sing when I'm in the woods, and it's just me,
Wow.
just me.
I'll tell you, you are, I said it 100 times already, but I'm going to say it one more. You're definitely an inspiration. You stay so busy, and you seem like you love it so much, and I can feel it when I listen to you talk. And it's been it's a pleasure. And I'll tell you what. Go ahead.
And I love people too. That's the thing. I've got hope for us hairless two-leggeds that we're gonna do this right and figure it out. So I really do. I've met some of the most awesome people in the world in this.
That's great, and I'm sure I can speak for a lot of us hairless two-legged people as well. We love you too, and we look forward to your next venture. And I've taken up a lot of your time today, and I appreciate the time you spent. But as always, I give my guests a chance to close it out for us. You can talk about anything you wish, rather something that maybe I missed, or even just touching on your books again if you want. But it's up to you. But the floor is yours.
I want to thank you for inviting me to come on, and for Dan putting us together. I've enjoyed you so much, talking to you and back and forth with our messages and things. And to me, this is what we've got to do, not just in the Bigfoot world, but for everywhere. We've got to come back to respect. One of the things that I was told about us humans is, we don't respect the air, we don't respect the earth, we don't respect the water, we don't respect each other, and the worst thing is we don't respect ourselves. And if we can just come back to respecting ourselves, then we're not going to disrespect anything else. We're going to put everything in the proper order. And if anyone ever takes anything from me, it is that each of us are special, and each of us deserves to respect ourselves. And if we can just do that, we can learn anything we want to learn and, make this a really, really good life.
Well, Arla, I think that was very, very well said. And we want to thank you again for being our guest today. And as for now, thank you.
Thank you, Ed. It was fun.
It was fun.
There's 1, 2. I can see it looks like a third behind the unbelievable. No pictures, just sound.
Just listening.
Unreal.
Just listening.
Wow, I can see that one moving.
I know.
He's kind of bobbing up. He's crouched, but he's...
Yes. He's turned around 2 or 3 times and looked back behind him.
Yeah, right. But I can see him right there. Wow.
Shake the tree for me. You're right there by the tree.
I mean, Arla, I can't hardly believe this.
Did he move?
Yeah, I can see him.
I heard him move, didn't I? I heard you. Be careful. Be careful.
They're good at crouching and hiding.
Yeah, they are.
Wow.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys.
Oh, man. Okay, I'm turning it off. Oh, that's beautiful.
Are you recording?
I got that one. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Wow. Wow.
Just too cool.
Who is that doing that? Do you recognize the voice? Unbelievable. He's right out there.
I know. He does a good owl, doesn't he?
Oh, man. Well, it's got a
An off.
yeah, it's got that deep.
Yep.
Wow. Wow.
Can we come back in?
He's right down the path right there.
I know.
It's
Yep.
what I guess it was pleasing to them that I was swaying with them.
He's moving.
He's getting closer.